What? West through Hall, and welcome back to Learn Old English with the Wordhoard, a Medievolution Project production. I'm Richard Scott Nokes, your host. For those of you who have been missing these posts and podcasts of late, I've been really overwhelmed, but as this Hawaiian shirt indicates, I'm currently on fall break, and therefore I've had a chance to catch up and finally finish grading midterms and catch up on grading papers and that kind of thing, so I can return to these posts now. Now, last time we finished up, last time we met, we talked about verbs, and in fact, verbs were pretty simple. It's a lot to learn, but they work very simply, and they work in ways that, as a speaker of modern English, you are kind of intuitive to you. When we come back from fall break, my class will be moving into adjectives, which is chapter 8 in Baker's book. Now, I just want to say this about adjectives. We have studied pronouns, nouns, and verbs. For learning to translate Old English, your pronouns, nouns, and your verbs are going to do the bulk of the heavy lifting. Obviously, in any language, the nouns and the verbs do the bulk of the heavy lifting. In Old English, the pronouns also carry a lot of important grammatical information that you're going to need to make sense of the sentences, particularly when they're more complicated sentences. When you get to adjectives, which you'll see when you look at those paradigms, and you should learn the paradigms, they look pretty similar to you, or pretty familiar to you. They look very similar to the noun paradigms. In fact, Baker, who covers all of adjectives in just these 6 short pages, says this: "Indeed, though some Old English teachers may not approve of our telling you so, you may find it possible to read Old English prose pretty well without having to put in a lot of work on adjectives. In a noun phrase like thas athalan bokeres, the noble scholars, you can get the information that the phrase is genitive singular from either the demonstrative pronoun or the noun. The weak adjective athalan doesn't tell you much." And indeed, that's the case. A lot of the information, the grammatical information that we carried in these adjectives, is going to be redundant information that you can find elsewhere grammatically in the sentence. So for learning adjectives, I think it's far more important that you learn them as vocabulary rather than the paradigms. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't learn the paradigms, but you'll find that the paradigms are pretty easy because of their similarity to the noun paradigms. But really put a strong focus at this point forward on vocabulary building. Of course you want to understand how adjectives work. Of course you want to understand how adverbs work and conjunctions and prepositions. But when it comes down to the real life world of translation, the bulk of that work is already going to be, the grammatical work will be done by your nouns, verbs, and pronouns. So simply vocabulary building is what's important. Now, to that end, you will see that now we have these vocabulary lists that I call ACP. ACP is simply adjectives, adverbs, conjunctions, and prepositions. And there are a lot of them. I think I have 12 of them or something. And I've simply, there is no particular rhyme or reason to how I've divided them up, except that I've tried to have between 10 to 15 each time we would have a class meeting for my class. So that's maybe 25 to 30 a week is most often what the students are going to be required to memorize. If you can memorize faster than that, you should do so. But one of the things that's going to tell you which are the more important ones to memorize is simply to see what's coming up a lot in your translations. I have a colleague, Dr. Leslie Lockett at Ohio State, and one of the things that she does is whenever she looks up a word in her dictionary, she puts a little dot by it. And when she has, I think it's 3 dots next to a word, she says, well, I've now looked it up 3 times. It's time I memorize that word so I don't have to look it up again. So whatever method you use, now you really do, in addition, we need to shift the focus away from the grammar and more on to building vocabulary. At this point, that will help you a great deal more in your translations. Let me also point out to you that if you look at my class's schedule, you'll see that on week 11 we have oral recitations, and then we are having a class party on the 23rd of October to celebrate Cotton Library Fire Day. I'll talk a little bit more about that probably that week. But the oral recitations are, I think, an important part of learning Old English. You will never be put in a situation where you have to speak Old English as a translator. That's very unlikely, unless some sort of rift opens up in the space-time continuum and you get transported back to Anglo-Saxon England, or some Anglo-Saxon gets transported to the future and you're the guy called in to translate. Most of the time, what you're just going to be doing is looking at a text in Old English and translating it into modern English. But an important part of your education is really feeling comfortable with learning how to pronounce Old English. And so what my students have to do, and I strongly urge you to do this too, is to memorize about 20 lines of Old English poetry that they can recite from memory and confident of their pronunciation. If you can memorize those 20 lines, it will really go a long way to helping you with your pronunciation of prose that you haven't memorized. Okay, so before we go, I just want to read to you the new vocabulary words that you have for next time. A, which is always. Aduna, or adun, which is down. Athra, which is ever. Which is before. Atgadera, which is together. Eak, which is also or besides. You'll see that word a lot. El, which is entirely or all. Eft, which is afterwards. Fella, which is much. Feor, which is far. Forth, which is forwards. Fortham, which is therefore. And this has not come up a lot in our translation so far, but you will see fortham and phrases using fortham very often. So pay attention to that. Full, which is very, and furthum, which is even. Okay, so until next time, enjoy studying Old English, and have a nice fall break if you're on fall break like me.